A final court ruling says Egyptians with Israeli wives may lose their citizenship. Can there ever be peace and normal relations under the current daily tension? Could mixed marriages of Israelis and Egyptians pose a danger to Egypt's national security? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Hazm Seeker. Welcome to the program. The Egyptian High Court has upheld the decision to strip men of their citizenship if they marry Israeli women. Egypt is the biggest Arab country and was the first to conclude a peace treaty with Israel in 1979. But that treaty has had consequences that Egyptians are still uncertain how to deal with. Rawia Rageh reports now from the court in Cairo.
The verdict will no doubt constitute an embarrassment to the Egyptian government in diplomatic circles. And although observers say this will not have a direct effect on the peace treaty signed between Egypt and Israel more than 30 years ago, it is moves like this that are often cited by Washington as an obstacle to genuine peace in the region.
The case dates back to a year ago when a lower court ruled that Egyptian men married to Israeli women should be stripped of their Egyptian citizenship. The lawsuit was filed by a lawyer who said these intermarriages constitute a threat to Egyptian national security. But the government appealed the ruling, saying it's for Parliament to decide on such issues.
The court upholds the previous ruling, allowing the cabinet to decide on case-by-case basis whether citizenships should be revoked.
The case has highlighted once again the divide between the official Egyptian stance on peace with Israel versus the real sentiment in the street in the Arab world's most populous nation, where people often take to the streets to protest against Israel's policies towards the Palestinians. More than 30 years ago, Egypt became the first Arab country to sign a peace deal with Israel and recognize it. But in reality, that peace has been characterized at best as cold. Popular sentiment is primarily determined by the Palestinian situation, and this has given more room to lawsuits filed in Egyptian courts against anything that appears remotely sympathetic to Israel or its citizens. Anti-normalization sentiments have reached their height in recent years. It's a sore topic among Egyptian intellectuals. Pro-Israel writers have been disbarred. And most recently, Egyptian cultural officials have been derided for allowing an Israeli musician to conduct a concert in Cairo, even though the maestro is known for his defense of the Palestinian cause.
I congratulate the Egyptian judiciary for the second time because it made the distinction between Arab Israelis under occupation and those married to Zionist Israeli women. And we tell the government, wake up and do not allow anyone, whether it is the US or the EU, to interfere in our internal affairs.
It is not clear whether the Egyptian government will indeed carry out the verdict issued against Egyptian men married to Israeli women. But no doubt, for now, this verdict has quenched the thirst of many in the angry population seeking action against Israel. Rawia Rageh, Al Jazeera, Cairo.
Well, joining us now to talk more about this are our guests. In Cairo, Ambassador Hassan Isa, former head of the Israel Department at Egypt's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Also in Cairo, Ala Shalabi, he's deputy head of the Arab Organization for Human Rights. And in Jerusalem, Mohammed Dahli, he's a lawyer that specializes in civil rights cases. Hassan Isa, if I could start with you, this has got to be deeply embarrassing for the Egyptian government, hasn't it? I mean, this is isn't this basically a very poorly disguised form of discrimination against ordinary people who simply want to get married?
Absolutely not. Why? This is completely out of context and completely out of proportion. Now we're talking about a simple legal matter. When you talk about the son or daughter of a Israeli Jewish lady, the son or daughter, according to Jewish Israeli law, becomes Jewish. Now imagine that an Egyptian marrying a Jewish Israeli lady and they get a son. This son, according to Egyptian law, is an Egyptian. So he can be drafted into the army. Now imagine we have in the army an Israeli Jewish soldier in the Egyptian army. Now imagine this vice versa. How can this happen? So it is just a matter of legal matter. We had the same problem for Egyptian ladies marrying non-Egyptian males. According to Egyptian law, their sons or daughters are the nationality of the father, not the mother. So that has nothing to do with peace and has nothing to do with embarrassment. It's a simple legal situation.
All right, Ala Shalabi, are people's rights being violated here?
Well, as a matter of fact, if you are taking the matter just with legal meter to measure if there is a gap, a violation or something, you might find it. But according to or due to the tension arising in the region, we are talking about a de facto state of war between Egypt, the Arab nations, and between Israel. As you may know, after 3 decades of the peace agreement, the people and members of the authorities, the judiciaries, legislators, and even in the executive authority, they are still against normalization with Israel. Israel continue to impose the siege over Gaza Strip and continue to harass the Palestinians, whether in the occupied territories in 1967 or inside Israel against the Arab-Palestinian minority. Many violations have been committed. Some are by the United Nations described as war crimes and crimes against humanity. In light of these circumstances and this situation, what we can say, there are certain measures some states are taking at the time of tension, such as you find the United States of America. We have been promised by President Obama to release the Guantanamo Bay detainees after 120 days since his start in the administration, and now where are they? They are still in Guantanamo. And you have seen Israel and piracy in the international water in the Mediterranean against civil activists a few days ago. And now we are seeing, of course, we have seen the aggression for more than 22 days over Gaza with 1,400 casualties, mainly from the civilians. So in that atmosphere, how can we speak about a violation? As Ambassador Isa have mentioned, you can't have an Israeli serving the Egyptian military. But there is a distinction between the Egyptians who are married from the Arab-Palestinian minority and who are married to Jews. I don't have the updated statistics, but in 2003, the statistics were talking about 1,500 marriages from Israelis. Only 14 are from Jewish women. So we're not talking about a big violation or something like that. It's still against, of course, the Convention on the Reduction of the Statelessness of 1961. But we are talking here about the Convention on the Reduction, not on the elimination. And we will see that it was adopted in 1961 and came into force in 1975. But how many states have ratified this convention? Only 36 from 193 states all over the world. So we are talking about a problem that.
All right, let me put this.
Okay.
Okay, let me put the question to Mohammed Dahli in Jerusalem and bring him into this. I mean, how much is this the result of a poisonous atmosphere in the region as a result of Israel's policies?
You know, we lawyers usually say hard cases make bad law, and obviously this is one of the hard cases. We are talking about a very negative atmosphere in recent years, in recent days, actually. For decades now, and this is maybe what explains this decision of the High Court, the Egyptian High Court in Cairo. But if I want to comment on the question that you asked my colleagues in Cairo, although I'm a Palestinian living in Israel, I do think that this decision actually infringes upon the rights of the Egyptian men. I do not by any means encourage mixed marriages, but this is a private decision for anybody to take. Egyptians who come here, either to Palestine or to Israel, I think they make that decision on a private basis. Mainly it's labor immigration. And those who come here, 99% of them get married to Palestinians from the Palestinian minority who hold Israeli citizenship. Maybe 1 or 2% get married to Israeli women. I don't think that Egyptians who get married to Israeli women should be stripped of their Egyptian citizenship automatically. I think this is not really a threat to the national security of Egypt. And if this is a threat to the national security of Egypt, then I'm afraid really about the national security of Egypt. I think with today's high-tech and technology and what have you, espionage and stuff like that happens not through marriage necessarily. The Egyptian authorities could put, if they want, other measures. They could do whatever they want to make sure that through these mixed marriages, nothing happens to the national security of Egypt. But to say directly, just because of the mere marriage of an Israeli woman with an Egyptian man, that means that the Egyptian citizen should forfeit his citizenship, I do think this is a violation of international law.
All right, let's put that point to Ambassador Issa. Is the simple act of an Egyptian man marrying an Israeli woman a threat to the security of 80 million people?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And now, everybody, why are they putting it out of proportion and out of context? This is a matter,
you're stripping an individual of his citizenship. That's quite a major act.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. The legislator in Egypt is avoiding a conflict of laws. Now, as I said, a Jewish lady, when she gives birth to a boy or a daughter, a boy or a girl, this boy or girl, according to Israeli Jewish law, she's Jewish. In Egypt, an Egyptian giving birth to a boy or girl, according to it, please let me explain this. According to Egyptian law, the birth of a boy or child makes them Egyptian. So there is a conflict here in law. Now, what happens when an Egyptian marries an Israeli female? Shall we follow the Israeli law or the Egyptian law? What the legislator did is to avoid the conflict of laws, and this is known to any legal mind, any legal worker, or whether a lawyer or not. So it's a simple legal matter. Why put it in the context of normalization, or put it in the conflict of national security, or simple legal situation? We are avoiding the conflict of laws.
Ala Shalabi, are they simply abiding by legal principles here?
No, I would like to say first that the administrative court in Egypt have become a battlefield between the people and the government on many topics, including normalization against Israel. One year ago, the court have issued a ruling against importing gas to Israel, for example, and now we are seeing the court are, asking the government to withdraw nationality from those who are married to Israelis, but in a selective manner. And I believe that if we're gonna, the government, if it's going, the cabinet is going to enforce this ruling, they will do it in a selective manner, based on the ruling itself, making a difference between who are married from Arab Palestinian minority in Israel and the Jewish women. That's very important. So we are talking here, I'm trying to describe the atmosphere that a judge like Mohammed al-Husseini, for example, or others have been, building, what are the reasons they are building the rulings on? They are building on the atmosphere of tension in the region. I'm not talking about if this is constituted a violation or not. Of course, if you're gonna take the international standard as it is, without the soul of the circumstances and surroundings, you can say it's a violation. But if you are taking into consideration the nature of the conflict in the region in the last 6 decades, and these crimes, the gross violations, the systematic violations for human rights and international humanitarian law, what are you going to say to the people? The people will have to act, actually. And I believe the cabinet will not be in favor to enforce this ruling, and if it's going to be, it would be under the pressure of the people here in Egypt, and that's how we will have to avoid that as much as possible, and trying to treat the matter in another manner that will preserve the rights of the Egyptian citizens who even married to Israeli Jews or to Israeli Arab minority, Arab Palestinian minority, and at the same time to treat this dilemma. It's a problem. How to deal with those guys. As Ambassador Issa said, there is a contradiction here between the legislation in Egypt and the legislation in Israel. The child belongs to his mother in Israeli law. Okay.
Mohammed Dahli in Jerusalem, your response to that? I mean, the argument is that they're simply trying to match Israeli laws with Egyptian laws.
Well, again, as I said, I think this decision doesn't add much respect to the judiciary in Egypt. And I think so because the argument about conflict of laws is not really a valid argument here. We are not yet talking about the sons and daughters of the mixed couple. We are talking only now about the mixed couple itself. And we are not even talking about the process of naturalization. I didn't hear that the reason for stripping off the Egyptian citizenship from an Egyptian man who got married to an Israeli female, I didn't hear that the reason for that was the fact that the Egyptian man is going through the process of naturalization and is going through the process of achieving Israeli citizenship. It's just because of the mere fact that they got married. And there's no place in the world that can put such a harsh punishment on love. You know, people get in love. You might be against that, you might not like that, you know, you might not encourage that, you don't want that to happen. I understand the anger against the Israelis as a government and the Israeli people because of the acts and the atrocities that they are doing with the Palestinians throughout 43 years of occupation, with the siege on Gaza, with the recent events with the ships coming to Gaza and all of that. But judiciary, in my opinion, is supposed to act in a different manner. A judicial system and a court, a high court, is supposed to act based on the law, based on human rights, based on international standards, as my colleague just said.
And based on, would you please say that to the Israeli High Court of Justice? Would you please say that to the Israeli High Court of Justice, who have made forms of torture and discrimination are legal?
Mohammed Dahla, you want to respond to that?
If you ask me about the Israeli High Court or the Israeli Supreme Court, I have lots of criticism to this court as well. I write about that. I write critiques about the Israeli Supreme Court. I appear before the Israeli Supreme Court. I represent people in front of the Israeli Supreme Court. And whenever I have criticism, and I do a lot of criticism about the Israeli Supreme Court and the way that the Israeli Supreme Court has treated the Palestinians inside Israel, the way the Israeli Supreme Court is trying to help the apartheid regime of Israel in the occupied Palestinian Authority, the way the Israeli Supreme Court is misinterpreting, in my opinion, international law in a way to help the Israeli occupation regime in the West Bank and Gaza. But again, that's a different story. The fact that I criticize the Israeli Supreme Court, that doesn't mean automatically that what the Egyptian Supreme Court or High Court has done is okay.
Hassan Issa, I'll let you respond to that briefly because we've got to move on. Just briefly.
This is not a political matter. Why are we delving into a political matter? This is not a political matter. Countries normally.
Political matter. I am talking in the name of those Egyptians that I meet sometimes here in where I live in Jerusalem and in other places. Most of them come because of economic reasons. They immigrate as labor immigration.
Right.
They come here to work and maybe to get some
All
kind
right,
of
gentlemen, let me jump in here for a second.
Let me jump in here for a second
because we've got to move on. I just want to broaden this out a little bit and talk about a little bit more about where Israel stands on all of this. Israel has so far kept quiet on Egypt's decision to revoke citizenship from nationals who marry Israelis, but they themselves are no strangers to such legislation. During Ehud Olmert's administration, a bill was introduced demanding loyalty laws. This came following allegations that Azmi Bishara, a former member of the Knesset, was spying for Hezbollah and Syria, claims that were never proven, it has to be pointed out. This bill was resubmitted in recent days after an Arab-Israeli member of the Knesset, Hanin Zoabi, was an activist on board the Gaza-bound Freedom Flotilla last week. The bill would require Knesset members to give allegiance to, and I'm quoting here, a Jewish, Zionist and democratic state and to its values and symbols, or run the risk of losing citizenship. Here's what Hanin had to say on that matter.
I think it is not just a matter of citizenship, it's a matter of revenge. They are angry, they want a revenge, and they targeted targeted me as a way of this revenge. Israel is the only state in the world, the only country in the world which defined its citizenship in a political terms. If you are Zionist, if you identify with Zionism, if you identify with the Israeli policies, then you are a citizen. You can't be a citizen of Israel.
But as Danny Danon, the MP who drafted the bill, put it, only a suicidal country would allow its enemies to serve in the Knesset. Imagine if during America's war in Afghanistan, a Taliban member who lived in America served in the US Congress. So let's continue with this part of the discussion then. What we're seeing here are cases of citizenship being revoked on the basis of political or even marital issues. Are we witnessing a new trend in the Middle East here? And is this because of the continued tensions and violence in the region? Hassan Issa, that question to you.
Please. It is not unknown between respectable countries to match their laws together. We do this with tax laws so that there will be no duality in imposing taxes in two countries that are dealing with each other. The same thing with marriage laws. We are trying to avoid this conflict between two marriage laws. Now, exactly as you said, we are trying to avoid a situation in which a son of a Jewish Israeli female will be having to serve in the Egyptian army, will be forced to serve, or he goes to prison. So what we're trying to do is trying to avoid this conflict of these two laws. As a respectable country, we avoided this by depriving this Egyptian from his citizenship, so his son can be an Israeli, or he can be Jewish, or he can be whatever on earth he chooses to be. So please, let's not put it in its political context. It has no political connotation whatsoever here.
All right. Ala Shalabi, you want to respond to that? No. Ambassador Issa says that this doesn't involve politics at all.
Well, I believe the political environment is actually controlling the whole issue, because if we don't have this kind of tension and conflict in the region, we wouldn't have a lawyer like Nabil al-Wahsh raising this case to the administrative court here in Egypt. I sympathize those people who have been married to Jewish ladies. Unfortunately, I sympathize them. I can't find what to say to them. But it's a big dilemma for a country like Egypt. I don't think that a big country like Egypt will be heavily affected by a few marriages of Jewish women. But as a matter of fact, it's the matter that the environment in Egypt is against normalization with Israel, is trying to take actions against Israel and trying to do whatever they can through the administrative courts, through the prosecution, through whatever, through campaigning, through demonstrations, through everything. This is the rage coming. This is the voice of rage. And the judiciaries here are joining the voice of the public opinion here and trying to do something because they are part of it. And you can find the legislators also are participating in demonstrations against Israel and its crimes.
All right, Hassan Issa, sorry to interrupt. I want to put that back to Hassan Issa. I know you've said that this issue has nothing to do with politics, but put yourself in the position of an Egyptian man who simply wants to marry someone who happens to be Israeli and has no political considerations. And I mean, this ruling threatens to strip them of their citizenship. What do you say to that?
Well, if he wants to marry an Israeli, let me put it that way. I, as a diplomat, is prohibited from marrying any non-Egyptian. Does this have any restriction on my human rights? I cannot marry a non-Egyptian. If I am marrying an Arab female, they have to submit my request to the President of the Republic to give me the approval. Is this a restriction on my human rights? No, it's just a matter of law. It is just a matter of rule. Now, what is ruling all these situations is law number 20, issued in 1958. So we have been applying this law since 1958. Law number 20, 1958. It has been applied since 1958. Raise it now in the atmosphere of tension, as my colleague Mr. Ala in Cairo says. Raise it now. You try to attribute it to that, but it's wrong. It is a matter of law, just a legal situation.
All right, that is going to have to be the last word. We are unfortunately out of time, gentlemen, but I want to thank all our guests in Cairo, Hassan Isa, Ala Shalabi, and in Jerusalem, Mohammed Dahli. Thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. And as always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye for now.